God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Selah. The story of Providence Missionary Baptist Church is one of resilience, the story of a people who not only endured the horrors of slavery and segregation, but the story of a people who survived by God's grace, inspired by tenacious leaders, strengthened by the bonds of fellowship and service in God's great name. This is the story of a church that has met the challenges of every era, a congregation that's built a secure foundation, able to change with the times, poised for the future, as the community celebrates 150 years from Brush Arbor to Community Anchor. This is the story of Providence Missionary Baptist Church. In 1862, as the Civil War raged, a group of enslaved men and women founded the first African-American Baptist church in Atlanta, Friendship Baptist Church. Reverend Frank Quarles was its founding pastor. The great congregation had humble beginnings. Its first members worshiped in a discarded boxcar, yet its leaders were visionaries. Friendship Baptist Church, the mother church, would birth 9 missions across Atlanta. Mount Zion Baptist Church, now Mount Zion Second Baptist Church, in 1868, and Providence Missionary Baptist Church, Wheat Street Baptist Church, and Paradise Baptist Church in 1871. Each mission church was located closer to where most congregants lived, that is, communities of freed men and women, with few resources, many who had to travel on foot, on unpaved roads, all too often barefoot. With its establishment in 1871, Providence was among the first of Friendship's offspring to serve that deserving community. The story of the mission that became Providence began in 1870 when Reverend Robert Grant believed a piece of land on Greens Ferry Street near Chapel Street was an ideal spot for one of those missions. A year later, in 1871, church members shaped the first structure by hand. It was an arbor of brush surrounded by willow trees. That very location gave the church its first name, Willow Tree Baptist Church. A church building was erected in 1874 during the pastorate of Reverend George Washington Martin, who served for 36 years between 1871 and 1907. When he became pastor, the church had only 30 members. Yet, through his perseverance over those 36 years, membership grew to 350. And with the new building came a new name, Providence, likely chosen because of its many prophetic interpretations, the protective care of God, timely preparation for future eventualities, and the means by which God directs all things. As time passed, those words would serve as a guide and touchstone. And in the 1970s, the word missionary was added to the name, reflecting the goals and history of the church.
I'm your child, Lord. while I run this race. Oh, I'm your child, Lord, while I run this race.
Inspired by God's promise, dedicated pastors would rise up to lead the congregation. Among them, Reverends W. Frank Pascal, W. H. Brown, George Archbald, L. H. Ingram, D. L. Lowe, Dr. Lawrence M. Glenn, J. H. Ponders, and W. R. Jones. Reverend Dr. Charles D. Hubert served from 1929 to 1944. Under his leadership, in the late 1930s, the fellowship would seek a new site to make way for John Hope University's Homes, the nation's first public housing projects for African Americans. And so the Greens Ferry building was sold, and a new church was erected at 659 Larkin Street, at the corner with Mayor Street. While it was under construction, the congregation worshiped in Sale Hall on the campus of Morehouse College. The new church was completed in 1941, and for more than half a century, Providence would be influenced by the surrounding neighborhood, just as the neighborhood would be transformed by the church.
The thing that I remember about him and the church and in the neighborhood was that at a young age, he was concerned about a lot of us young men doing good in school, wants to know how we were doing in school. So his interest was, if you're doing well in school, I want to make sure you get to Morehouse. In fact, not only did he was a pastor at Providence, he also was a professor at Morehouse.
I just think back to when I came from the country to Clark College. Providence was the church for students because, you see, in those days, students didn't have cars, so they had to go to the nearest church. Students from Spelman, students from Morehouse. On Sunday mornings, you'd see them, I say, streaming to Providence. So Providence was a church for students at that time. Friendship was a little farther away, but Providence was right there.
Sunday school was a big deal. You came to Sunday school. I remember at the old church, we sat in a certain corner of the church for Sunday school. Each section was a different place where you did Sunday school, but we were all in the same room. And you had the adults, you had the children. But the funny thing about Sunday school, we were right next door to a holiness church, and they had band and drums, and I would love to listen to their music. And our music was a little more stoic in that we sang good Bible songs, but I loved the beat of the music next door that I could hear.
Reverend Dr. Lucius M. Tobin served as senior pastor from 1944 to 1955. Under his leadership, the Brotherhood and Dorcas Club Women's Ministry were founded. The senior choir was also founded under the direction of Lenny Green. When Reverend Tobin fell ill, Reverend Clarence Gresham served as interim pastor in 1955 and 1956. Reverend Walter Raleigh McCall became pastor in 1957 and served until 1977.
Providence didn't have a lot of young kids couples in the church who had a lot of children during that particular time. So the children that we played with most were from the projects. And very meaningful. And I have sustained those relationships over the years with some of those same people. And the kids from the project went to Providence, so they were church members. So it was easy to, transfer from the church to the projects because they were the same kids that went to Providence. Not necessarily kids of people who were in Providence, but they were still Providence kids, if that makes any sense to you. Yeah, they were community kids.
At the age of 2, my mother took me to the church. She walked me down and she held me by the hand, took me to the church, and that was, I grew up in a housing project. She raised me by herself, and I think God must have given her the notion that I needed to be around some men. She was raising me as a single mom, and I think she wanted me to be around some Christian church-going men. So she walked me down the street, which was a couple of blocks down Larkin Street, to 659 Larkin, where the church was then located. And I remember, I do remember it. I stepped up on the landing or the first little step of the church, which led to the door. There were 2 men outside, which I imagine were deacons. And I remember one of them taking me by the hand and walking in with me to Sunday school.
Under Reverend McCall's leadership, Providence became a center for civil rights activities in Atlanta and a sanctuary for the Atlanta student movement. Reverend McCall created Race Relations Sundays and Brotherhood Sundays at Providence, inviting clergy of other races and faiths to attend. He established the Interdenominational Retreat Center.
So actually they started meeting in the basement of the church. And it was people from the Jewish community, Muslim community, blacks, whites, again, all races, all religions, and they came around the table and discussed how they could mend this divide.
Reverend McCall also welcomed gospel music into worship. Vivian Williamson became Minister of Music, serving from 1957 to 1997.
I can remember when we first got the choir, the gospel choir. It was called the YACAS, Young Adult Christian Association. And lo and behold, the people, the congregation wanted to know what those young folks think they was up there doing.
Right, singing gospel.
Singing gospel, because we was more like stiff. You didn't say amen. You didn't do that. Now you're dancing all over the church.
One Sunday, we decided, the Yaka choir decided we were going to rock and clap our hands. And I never will forget when we finished the song. It was a semi-gospel song, because Providence just didn't do gospel music, I'm gonna be honest with you. Daddy looked around after we finished and he smiled, and it was like, that was the best thing since sliced bread for him. I mean, emotion in the church. And so we knew he liked it. Before we could get home, the phone was ringing when we walked in the door. Reverend McCall, I cannot believe you allowed that blues in our church this morning. Did you see those young people up there rocking and clapping their hands? Is that where we are going? Have we moved to that? Oh my God. And Daddy said, I liked it.
More dedicated, devoted leaders followed Reverend McCall at Providence. Reverend Bernard Blount, who served from 1978 to 1980, organized the Young at Heart ministry to help senior citizens. He instituted the Sunday morning breakfast program and the children's sermonette. And the same little boy whose mother took him to Providence when he was 2 became the youngest minister to be called to pastor Providence. Reverend Philip Terry was 27 when in 1980 he was called to serve as interim pastor, later to be named senior pastor.
I remember when I went to seminary, I met a lot of guys from other parts of the country, and a few of them that went up there with me from Morehouse, whose fathers were pastors of big churches from around the country. And I grew up in a house where my father wasn't present. And I began to have a little issue with God. I used to say to him, well, you know, I didn't have the example in the house that these guys had to be a man and to be a preacher and to be a pastor. And I was really saying, Lord, you kind of shortchanged me, didn't you? And God dealt with me about that. He took me to a scripture that says, I will be a father to the fatherless. And he helped me remember. In fact, he caused me to have flashbacks of my rearing in Providence Missionary Baptist Church. And God really, by his Spirit, spoke to me and said, what about Reverend McCall? Wasn't he like a father to you? The pastor who baptized you. What about Deacon Pugh, who later on became Reverend Pugh? What about Deacon Allen? What about Deacon Tyler? What about Deacon Fagan? What about Deacon Hunter? What about Deacon Sanders? All these men that I had as examples that I would not have had had I not gone to church.
Reverend Terry formed a cooperative alliance with neighboring churches and made the historic decision to ordain 5 women as deacons and install 2 women as trustees.
I was just in my office one day and somebody came in and said, is there any biblical prohibition to having women on the board of deacons? I thought about it for about 10 seconds and I said, no, I don't think so. And so at an upcoming meeting, we had 5 of our most faithful women in the church nominated, and they were confirmed. You know, in the Baptist church, we vote on these kinds of things, and they were voted to be deacons. And one of them is still there with us, Deacon Harriet Walton, who's in her days of working was a great teacher and mathematician.
I call her Aunt Julie. Her name is Julie Hunter. She was the first female chairman of the deacon board. We had 5 women that they considered in the city of Atlanta or Georgia were about the first female deacons that they can remember that having, you know, women in the church, because a long time ago they didn't believe that women should be in the pulpit.
It started a trend because a lot of the black churches, Baptist churches in the city, did one or two. They heard about it, so they did 1 or 2. They were forced into it to do some ordaining of female deacons, but we were the first.
Another innovation under Reverend Terry's leadership was the creation of a Saturday school.
We found out that a lot of people in the neighborhood, which was John Hope Homes and University Homes housing projects, which have been torn down now, one of the members went door to door just to find out, why don't your kids come to Sunday school? And they said, because my kids don't have the clothes to wear to Sunday school. They thought they had to dress them up. So when I didn't even really realize this until it happened, but if you have it on Saturday, they didn't think the kids had to dress up. So they sent them anyway. And so the Sunday school actually began to grow. And with the next pastor after me, it continued to grow.
Corrine Listenby served as director of Saturday school.
She started out with 2 or 3 kids, and after they found out what was going on and how much she was teaching them, it grew. She had hundreds of children on Saturdays. That was very important to reach out to the community and get these children and teach them not just church stuff or Bible stuff, but also about living.
Reverend Dr. Van Esther Pugh served as interim pastor from 1986 to 1987. He emphasized Christian education and maintained a familiar order of worship. And yet again, transformation was on the horizon, inside and outside the church walls, as Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley stepped up to lead the church in 1987. He served as senior pastor for 25 years until 2012.
Dr. Durley was a man of the people. You could call Dr. Durley at 3 o'clock in the morning and he'll come running. And that's just the type of man and the type of leadership you saw from him. He was one that would never turn anyone away. If you ever had a problem, if you ever had issues within your family, he dropped everything he had and he came running. And that's rare to find in the times that we live in.
My son got ill. Pastor Durley and my husband had a relationship from Morehouse. Pastor came to visit us at the church, at the hospital rather, and the pastor from the church we were going to never showed up. So my husband came that Sunday, and it was Easter.
Okay.
And he joined the church. So you follow your husband.
I had come back to Atlanta, and I was at barber shop, and I was waiting, got to go in, but I heard Reverend Durley in the next chair. I didn't know who he was, but I heard him in the next chair, and he was talking about, but I knew he was a minister.
Okay.
And he was talking about developing church programs.
Okay.
And he was talking about the things he wanted to do with his church.
Okay.
Right? And being a minister myself, right? And it was difficult for me to make up my mind where to go to church.
Right.
And I did not want a sad minister,
Right.
And I didn't want a minister that could preach but couldn't do anything else.
Exactly.
Right? I wanted a preacher who involved himself in community.
Okay.
Being a community activist myself,
Okay.
right? So he left, and as he was leaving, I had this thing that barbers do around my neck, right? But I just got up and went out the door right afterwards.
Okay.
All right. Gave him, told him that I wanted to join his church.
What about that?
And gave him my tithe for the time.
You gave him your tithes right there at the barber shop.
Well, yeah, but it's outside.
All right.
I didn't want to make a show.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I gave it to him outside and told him that I heard his program.
Okay.
And that's the reason I was joining.
Very
and,
impressive.
He has never let me down.
Very impressive.
His involvement in community is like no other minister in this city. Right.
All right.
And he's the only minister I know that he's liked as well on one side of the city as on the other.
Very good.
And he has as much influence with white ministers as he does with black ministers,
Very good.
right?
Very good.
And he has a way of bringing people together.
Under Reverend Durley's leadership, civil and human rights and interfaith dialogue continue to be synonymous with the church.
We bear a sacred responsibility to honor America's varied faith traditions and to promote a culture of mutual respect and assurance of religious freedom for all.
He was like really out in the community. Everyone in Atlanta, probably, if you mentioned Gerald Durley, everybody knew him because that was his passion, was really being out in the community, going to a lot of nonprofits, and just helping people. So that was his thing.
In April of 1992, the Rodney King verdict admonished the police officers for apparent wrongdoing. And so I recall the Atlanta University students really took to the street in protest. Along with the protest, Providence was present. I recall Pastor Durley, who was the pastor of Providence at that time, coming out and addressing the students. So to see an activist who really had the ear and the respect of young people drew me to Providence upon graduating from Clark Atlanta University.
Let's get away from the labels and let's find the humanity in all of us, all of God's creation. And that's why we've always tried to create that kind of environment inviting people to the congregation, inviting people to come and teach, inviting people to come so that we can grow. And any congregation worth its salt must expand its boundaries.
He had many Jewish groups come in, Muslims. There are people that are never exposed to anything. And so the exposure was so good. I think everybody started to realize, wow, we're not alone in this world.
We were able to be exposed to people that were in the movement who had direct action or direct leadership in the civil rights movement, black and white, all races. We were also able to meet people that would support some of the ministries that we were doing that were out in the community through his relationships. So he brought in not only the spiritual teachings and the preaching, but also the community into the church.
All of us had very little, but others, many had little smaller than just little, less than others, I would say. And our whole attempt through the outreach of the church was to go into the other portions of the university homes, which were all public housing, and to help those who didn't have. So that was a part of our feeding program. People would come to the church and get things, clothing, ministry, and during the Christmas, I remember many times during the Christmas we would have Christmas, which they now call the angel tree. But it was just making sure that every child in the community had at least one gift, and they could come to the church. And just in my mind, that's what it was. And it was always an outreach, caring type of environment.
At one time, the homeless men, when we were on Larkin Street, on Sunday mornings, they came to the church for breakfast. And soon afterwards, it was determined that they needed not just physical food, but spiritual food. So we started having a worship service, and then they would go downstairs and eat. And that's how our early morning service began.
We reached out to everyone, and everybody just became a part of Providence.
So Providence has always been a congregation that brought politicians in. Before we would back them, even though we were nonpartisan and not political, we could ask the questions as to who would best meet the needs that we need in terms of trash collection, in terms of police brutality, in terms of housing equities. So it is absolutely incumbent that the church be a part of not only the salvific plan, but also integrating how we work with the politicians and the legislators and the business community. So we're an integral part of it, because we ultimately are the moral, as Dr. King says, we're the moral consciousness of a nation. So that's why, in Providence, we've always tried to keep that as a cornerstone of our ministry. Providence has never wanted to be an island unto itself. We've always wanted to reach out and be a beacon of light in a dismal situation.
Under Dr. Durley's leadership, Reverend Curtis Eccles served as associate pastor, and the late Reverend Janie Redmond was the first church administrator. Community outreach ministries, always a cornerstone of Providence, also grew, engaging entire families, including a 12-step program, health ministries, Change Lives, Can You Soar, Father's Resource Center, and the creation of a Red Cross Disaster Center.
So we had a breakfast ministry that my dad was a part of, and so me and Stefan would be there, you know, scrambling eggs, putting cheese in, doing whatever we were instructed to do.
I think Mariah was buttering bread for hundreds of folks probably before she was 4 years old. So.
Yeah. Deeply rooted in
the spirit of service that is important when you look at Atlanta as a whole, and looking at the ways in which historic churches were or are a part of the fabric of Atlanta and Black religion in Atlanta and Black culture in Atlanta. And so with roots that dig that deep, you can't help but feel the pulse of Providence in different spots of Atlanta because of the service that it has really invested, from Larkin Street all the way over, right? And so reaching even back and just understanding the legacy that has come through Providence in Atlanta, it's a staple and it's extremely important.
It's not one where you can be a backbencher and anonymous. It's one where if you come there and people get to see you, they get to know you, you're given an opportunity to give of yourself in terms of service to that branch of Zion.
Actions to increase environmental stewardship and the role of women in church life also expanded.
When I first was hired as assistant, one thing I noticed was that there was no ministry directly for women. And having run into the same problem on the seminary campus, when I was in seminary, Morehouse School of Religion, there was nothing for women. They did a lot for the men, but there was no specific entity for women. And so I created something called Sister Speak, where seasoned women clergy could come in and talk to those who were in school. And when I came to Providence and they talked about women's ministry, I tweaked that model so that it would include lay women. And it gave us a chance to not only pull in various clergy members, female clergy members, but also to give women a chance to dialogue about their issues, separate and apart from the church, issues of faith, relationship, employment, you name it, we talked about it.
And the style of worship would again take on new forms to reach a more diverse community of congregants.
We realize now that we need to reach out to all of God's people, not just some, but everybody. So it's been a wonderful ride to see us now using keyboards and electronics and bass guitarists, and we have, and every now and then we have a guy on the djembes, and we have a guy coming in every now and then on the lead guitar, and we have, we have so much other music that we infuse into our service that it's just, I can't see us going back going in any other direction, So it's been a blessing.
So the styles have changed, but in terms of the worship, it's still been a place where you come and when you come and seeking comfort, hearing words of faith, and drawing strength that has remained consistent during my entire time here.
Reverend Durley would also serve during another historic transition for Providence when the congregation moved to its current location, 2295 Benjamin E. Mays Drive, in 1995.
So when I became pastor, we began to talk about how do we find a place where we could grow. Southwest Atlanta, many African Americans had moved to Southwest Atlanta. Southwest Atlanta at one time was a place that was controlled and lived in by white Americans, and they said no black folks would live here. But it shifted a lot. So many of the more middle-class blacks had moved to that area, so we felt that it would be very appropriate to move where our parishioners would be. So we found a building there that was originally Beachy Hill Baptist Church, which is a Southern Baptist church, one of the most popular Baptist churches in Georgia. And we worked it out and bought the building from them, and we moved from Larkin Street to Benjamin E. Mays.
On Larkin Street, it was a very small, kind of intimate group of people. And we realized that you can't really just exist in a little bubble. Everyone, I think, was ready for that next step. So we did move to Benjamin Mays, and I think families grew because the younger members of the family then were interested in coming. So it started there, and then their friends. So it did grow quite a bit.
I think we did some more bold things with Reverend Durley. When we moved over to where we are today, and with Reverend Durley, we started partnering with other churches. So we partnered with Johnson's Ferry Baptist Church. We partnered with some other churches and other faiths that perhaps we would not have done in the past.
So in 1995, when they moved to the current location off Benjamin Mays, though they were no longer in that community, the spirit of serving the community has continued. Community garden, food ministry, housing program, clothing ministry, holding economic empowerment seminars, doing things for our seniors, having a benevolence ministry to minister to brothers and sisters who need help with their bills. These are things that Providence has continued to do and will continue to do. And I think its importance in the community is it's not just a place for those who are looking to grow and mature in Christianity. It's also a place that's looking to wrap its arms around brothers and sisters of the community, independent of their religious faith, in saying, if you need help, you need love, and you need support, we are here for you.
Under Reverend Durley, the arts took on a more important role in church activities. This included the Angelic Wings of Praise under the directorship of Nakia Coleman, and the Roses and Royal Lords under the direction of Deacon Donetta Bryant. The drama ministry also expanded under the leadership of Janet Milton, Pamela Jackson, Melba Blunt, Bridget Shepard, and Charmione Sparrow. The church tent theater became a staple of the community.
You want to have a lot of fun at the Slab Town Convention. I have to admit tonight, I hope that you all have on your funny bones, your funny hats. This is one sick, tired crew. All on behalf of Providence Missionary Baptist Church, I'd like to welcome you to the 7th or the 8th annual Tent Theater in the Neighborhood. You ought to give yourselves a round of applause. We come on your grounds tonight, God, to first of all lift up your name, and next to have a great time as a community. In the name of Jesus Christ, thank you. Let us all enjoy the Slab Town Convention.
some of the things that I really love that we have done in the past was our tent theater, that we would invite the community out. And we've got some very talented folks in our church who can, it's Broadway, in my opinion, Broadway quality theater that we do. And so, and now we have things like Trunk or Treat, things like our fall festival that we open up to the community and the city at large to participate with us. And so it's always been very active in the community.
And always Providence would uplift the past as a source of strength for the present and future.
The other thing that that I think was unique to Providence, I think most churches in Atlanta during Black History Month celebrate. We would do the fourth Sunday, and everybody would come in their African clothing, and we had a member, we call her Miss Geneva, who would present historical information. We would sing spirituals, traditional hymns, as a way of keeping the history alive.
I used to spend a lot of time on our Black History Month. I felt that was very important for us all to really understand what our contribution has been to this country. And I felt that a lot of children knew nothing about what was going on. So I spent a lot of time on Black history. We brought people in during that time to speak. There were many facts, there were many inventions that were done by Black people that I thought we knew nothing about. I tried to go back and pick out things that I felt we had overlooked ourselves. And I think it was a very, very enjoyable time. People really got on board. I think the church really felt like, wow, we're really something. And we are.
While women have long served as dedicated leaders of Providence, Reverend Durley's retirement in 2012 also marked another milestone for the church. Reverend Kathy Chavis was selected as the first woman to serve as interim pastor. She had already broken through the stained glass ceiling as the first woman to serve as full-time assistant pastor.
As assistant pastor, it took a minute for people to get used to the switching role, but it wasn't a challenge. They just had to get used to it. And as far as being interim, the only thing that changed was that I was preaching every Sunday. I was still doing the same duties I did when I was assistant.
Years before becoming assistant pastor, Reverend Chavis directed after-school programs for the church. She also served as assistant director of the Can You Soar program for at-risk youth. As pastor, her many accomplishments include directing outreach, evangelism, and Christian education, along with counseling and coaching seminary students. In September 2012, Reverend Dr. Damon P. Williams was called to servant leadership as the 19th pastor at Providence.
I did not think I was ready. I was very familiar with Providence, very familiar with the ministry of Providence. And interestingly, 25 years earlier, my pastor, Reverend Dr. Aaron Parker, lost the vote to Reverend Durley for Providence. So he was very familiar with Providence and the ministry of Providence, but absolutely not. At the time that I applied, I was not married, I was not ordained, I had no pastoring experience, and I had never actually worked for a church before. So when he told me he wanted me to apply for a church that was over 140 years old, with the history and the tradition of a Providence Missionary Baptist Church, I thought he was plumb crazy. But I'm a good Baptist, and I do what my pastor tells me to do, and that's how I ended up turning in an application. And by the time they interviewed me, I told them I was engaged. And someone asked me on the search committee flat out, did I get engaged just to get this church? And I informed them, no, I did not. I was planning on proposing to the love of my life after I finished seminary. And when I finished seminary in May of 2012, I did propose. And when I told them, I'm marrying her whether y'all called me or not. And we're going to be together for a lifetime, whether I'm the pastor of this church or not. I think that calmed a lot of fears. But in my interview process, I was asked by the pulpit search committee. When I met with the trustees, I was asked by them. When I met with the deacons, I was asked by them. When I met with the membership, I was asked by one of the members, one of our strongest and longest tenured members, Sister Lillian Atkins. It was the very first question she asked me when I met with the membership, why I wasn't already married. I think she even pointed out that I was in my early 30s. Why, as someone who's in your early 30s, are you not already married? And so it was God's grace that really allowed them to call me without me being married.
So initially it was like, yes, exciting. Hold on. What does this mean? What does this look like? But I was okay with it. And, we had processed and talked about it. And, there's almost this assumption going in. We met in seminary, so I was already functioning in ministry. And so there's the assumption of like, okay, you're either going to do something in ministry or you're going to be a first lady, or it's going to be, what does that look like? And I think the biggest piece in the pause was, okay, wait, we're going to get married and he's going to be pastor. So it's like all happening at the same time. So it's just deep breath. Let's go. All right. But it was very exciting.
During Reverend Williams' tenure, church attendance has not only grown, but has expanded online beyond the four walls of the church.
If you listen to me preach, I'm going to offer very contemporary references. I might refer to a contemporary music artist, but I still might give you the lyrics of a good old hymn that is the hymn that sang the theology of our church. If you listen to our music on Sunday morning, you might hear a Christian contemporary song, and then at the end they weave in one of the hymns of our church.
But it's a difference in time as well. And so doing things like streaming, the technician, the engineer, is bringing us forward to do those things. Now, I think we would have gotten there eventually, but he's got that kind of a focus and is doing some things that, putting us out on the edge of technology.
Under Reverend Williams, Providence has also witnessed more youth participation in worship and more opportunities for young members to learn and lead.
Now Children's Church has grown to a whole thing where the kids are downstairs and have their own area, and they're outside of service on certain Sundays and have it's a whole ministry, which has expanded to a huge ordeal. And that's just how the church has developed and grown.
From our pulpit, you have young people not only talking about being leaders for the future, they're taking leadership roles. They're reading scripture, Some of the young folks have been able to say prayer. Some of them have been able to do the announcements. Some of them just taking leadership role at a young age.
Most of my friends that are at our church now, we all three of us have influenced them to come to church and come to this church actually, and now they've joined. So it just goes to show how Providence Church teaches us how to go on in our daily lives and talk to our peers.
One of the great things about our youth ministry at Providence is we really try to take a 360-degree approach to ministry. And so what that means is that we're trying to grow their relationship with Christ, get them in the water, get them baptized. We want to also grow them spiritually, so we want to have different activities and programming that's going to grow them spiritually and in the faith and their relationship with their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
We'll get a group together with all the boys and we talk about stuff like, it's mainly life skills and how that connect to God and like trusting your faith in Lord and stuff.
We're trying to do a multitude of different things with our youth as it relates to their spiritual formation and growth. And so it could be anything from a Sunday school class, a lesson, an activity, games, things of that nature, as well as their dance or choir rehearsal, because we want them to be well-rounded individuals and citizens of the world.
The fact that we can really open up and we can share about how we feel about that, I think that's why that gives us the opportunity to tell our friends, because we can tell them about all the fun things that we're doing at church.
During Dr. Williams' tenure, the women's ministry has also experienced a rebirth, while innovative, dynamic Bible studies classes have been created and embraced.
They pour into everybody, they give it their all, very by the word, teach very well, It's not just a hoopla, hollering and screaming in sermons. It's a thing of teaching you the word. And I think that's what a lot of churches are missing these days. And Pastor Williams, he does a great job of teaching the word, so you understand the word. He's very big on reading the Bible, not just hearing from others what the Bible says, but what does the Bible say to you?
With Bible study and with Sunday school, you can help, if you're attending, to grow spiritually, get stronger in your faith, and actually learn how to apply it in your life.
Reverend Williams has ensured our history is well preserved and protected. With his guidance and through the efforts of the Archives Committee, the church published a comprehensive, concise, and documented history celebrating the 145th anniversary of Providence. And he has also overseen an expansion of engagement in the community surrounding the church.
Well, I think we have a visionary pastor who is awesome. And I think that he and the congregation have a belief that it's more than just coming to church and doing what we do within those four walls, that it's really about reaching out, identifying needs, and trying to see how we as a congregation can meet those needs.
Worship on the Lawn is bringing the worship experience outside of the four walls of the church. The church's mandate is not to stay locked within four walls, but we are to reach out, bring the message to the people, celebrate with the people. And so Worship on the Lawn gives us an opportunity to do that. People are walking by, they're driving by. It's not just for the membership, it's for anybody.
One of the main things we're doing is he's like very active in the school. That's our neighborhood school. So we have basically almost like adopted them. So he does a lot of things, and going down, speaking with the students and speaking with the staff. So that has really been a big hit.
We received donations from people upon Lisa's death, and we wanted to put it to use. And so what better way to continue Lisa's life legacy by establishing a foundation? And so those funds help to capitalize what is now has served our community for 6+ years, $60,000+ in awards, as well as providing tutorial services free of charge to youth in Southwest Atlanta at Providence Missionary Baptist Church.
We're able to bring in tutors from Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and give and offer free tutoring to students in not only just in our church, but in our local community. We have a great team of volunteers who have helped us for several years and continue to help us to grow with our youth that are committed, that are consistent, that are faithful, that really have a heart and passion for our youth.
The way Providence understands the Bible and the way that we minister it in our church is that before Jesus taught the gospel to anyone, he was giving sight to the blind, he was feeding the hungry, he was resurrecting the dead. Christ was meeting basic needs. And that's what we try to do at Providence. That's why we're in the space of buying and renovating homes in the community so we can put a roof over a person's head, looking to expand our work with the Atlanta Community Food Bank so we can feed the hungry, purchasing commercial buildings that are in front of our space so that we can offer economic empowerment to African American owned businesses in the Southwest Atlanta and Cascade Heights community. This is all important to ensure that people's basic needs are met so that when the gospel is going forward on Sunday, they are available to receive. That's my vision, to give people the opportunity to know that they're accepted, they are loved, they are forgiven. And we will help support you in any way the Lord gives us the ability to do so that you can receive this great gospel that we have to share.
So it's a lot of things going on that have been meant to, and a vision to be a blessing to the community, whether it be a clothing facility or whatever. So he just wanted us to continue to be a blessing in our community.
But we pass out bags of food every Friday. Seniors 1 week and non-seniors 1 week.
I think it's important for any church, any faith community to be a part of that community. And the primary way of being a part of that community is sharing your resources with the community in whatever way you can. And I think this is an opportunity for Providence to share resources with the greater community, and especially for the seniors.
We do a lot of outreach things in the community, and that helps bring in people and give them a sense that, yes, this is a nice place, it's a wonderful place, and they care more about the members or the community than they do the numbers.
That's what God said, you're a servant. See what I'm saying? And we try to do what God say. No reward, no nothing, just serving the people.
Throughout, Providence has served as a citadel for hope for people seeking spiritual renewal. Resilient and flexible, responding to the community's needs for comfort, support, inspiration, and guidance.
If you go back to the very beginning, and we have always had that role when during our days on Larkin Street, it was a haven for homeless. It was a haven. We had a program for HIV and AIDS at a time when AIDS was a death sentence, and there was a lot of fear and misinformation about AIDS. But so it's always been a place that people in need could find comfort and support. We always interacted with the schools in the area, so students, and it's just been in a sense, a melting pot in a smaller way, but people have always, I think, found some solace at Providence.
And I can recall going out with my grandfather in the community and delivering food in John Hope and University Homes. And
you said that shopping cart.
That's right, that little silver shopping cart that we probably bought 3 or 4 of, right?
I don't know where he got it from, but he had a grocery cart that he would push throughout the John Hope community. And he was in his 60s then, late 60s. And I would say, Dad, you need to, get somebody to do this. He said, I've got to take my elderly people their lunches. I said, you're elderly. But he did it, and he did it with all of his heart.
To see that somebody else is helped along the way. Don't leave anybody behind.
Throughout our history, Providence has been enlivened by people, devoted, dedicated people, that not only includes our pastors, but our first ladies, because behind every prominent pastor is a spiritual force, the pastor's wife. Year after year, our dedicated leaders include the discipleship of deacons who have been instrumental in assisting the pastor and community, and all of our devoted volunteers, from trustees to ushers, have been vital servants to the kingdom building of the church.
My grandfather helped build the church on Larkin Street. He was a brick mason who had attended Tuskegee. And my grandmother had, she was there, oh God, she was one of the mothers of the church. And she was retired from Spelman when I was born. So that's how I got to Providence. And there's a lot of history for me here. A lot of history, so I can't see myself being anywhere else.
And the things that we do, we could not have done without great leadership.
Yeah.
Dating back to
not just pastors,
right?
We're talking about like trustees,
everyone,
deacons,
everyone. And I think that's what has
mothers.
Been, a tremendous effort amongst this organization to push us as a black church forward. Is everyone has come together collectively for one goal, and that is to service the community that we're in.
I was also a member and a president of the Matron Circle for 2 terms. And
that's historic. Mom was the president also.
My mother was, my mother was the president, and our Aunt Romel was the founder. At Christmas time, we're involved in the Angel Tree program that's here. We're also involved with the feeding program that's here, and the clothing program that's here.
And a big fundraiser.
Yes. And I don't like to mention that, but we do.
But as a trustee, we recognize them mightily for their major contributions that they make to the ministries of the church. They do just good stuff.
Providence has long served as a spiritual home to those who have sacrificed for the country, a nation that brought their ancestors to our shores in chains. From the acclaimed Tuskegee Airmen to those who have served in more recent conflicts across the globe. Many educators and elected officials have also been part of the congregation over the years, and many who never held public office, but who have still been role models and mentors.
I could walk in the church on Sunday and see Maynard Jackson sitting on the front row watching his son play the drums. I could see Judge Hatchett sitting a couple rows in front of me, as well as several doctors and lawyers, prominent folks in the city, all worshiping, all with the same personality of just warm, loving, and welcoming.
Very much ingrained in the Spelman Morehouse, AUC, Clark, philosophy of education and getting an education. I remember Dr. Benny Mays telling me when I was going off to college that to whom much is given, much is required. So I didn't go to Morehouse, but because he was a member, he instilled in me as a growing young adult that I had responsibilities.
But there was a lot of educators at Providence, a lot. So our kids was always taught the right thing, and the mother's board, even for us growing up, if we did not do the right thing, our parents knew. And we came up in that time when if we got a spanking as a child, you got a spanking at home if one of the church people had to speak to you. So that background of doing the right thing and growing up with a lot of integrity and a lot of encouragement.
Even though most of them here was college graduate, teachers, principals, it didn't matter. You was welcome. And they always welcome you with open arms. That's still true today.
There are a lot of long marriages throughout Providence. You know, we could just look back, and if
look at my husband's parents. They were married 62
years before they
62
passed.
before they passed, and other couples throughout the church. You know, that's pretty much a part of the history of Providence. Long-lasting marriages.
As a boy growing up in the church, I knew I wanted to be married one day, and I was seeing people in the church who were married 20 and 30 and 40 years. And I remember saying to myself, that's what I want. That's the kind of marriage I want. The man that taught Sunday school to me for a lot of years, and sometimes I was the only person in his class, Reverend Pugh. He was Deacon Pugh, and then he became Reverend Pugh. He was married to his wife over 50 years. And I saw the dedication that they had to each other, and I always said, that's the kind of marriage I want.
That platform that Providence has, you know, that rich history, understanding, you know, that today you can be this person, tomorrow you can really change the world. And for those leaders to actually still be there while we were actually there, it just made my future so bright. It opened the door for many possibilities. There was never a situation where I didn't feel like I could not do anything because I had so many role models in front of me. And that was from, you know, those that walked in the civil rights era just to simple, you know, youth pastors, basketball coaches. There was always support, and there were always people that were willing to give back.
What the church did was gave me such an inner strength through always acknowledging the youth, always supporting the youth, talking about education, talking about spiritually, what we should do, and being there and us seeing it. It gave me such a self-confidence that when I experienced my first bit of racism, it was after high school with my first job at a CNS bank working part-time.
Just a place where you can come and be nurtured. I was nurtured from childhood to become the person I am now. From different programs that we had in church, I was taught to speak in front of people, I was taught to project when I was speaking, and we were just taught leadership skills as a result of being in Providence.
Providence has always been and continues to be a welcoming church, embracing new families as if they were always family.
It's home. It's a base. It's a place that I've spent many years worshiping and serving. It's a place that even when we were away for a long time, God continued to give us dreams about Providence. And we came back home, and we may visit other places, worship other places, but there's no place like home. There's no place like the people. Some know you from your youth. They're newer members there. But when you go to Providence, you feel the love from the older ones, from the younger ones, and you feel like you have a place, that there's a spot for you. And it's just been a continuous family. It's been the spiritual feeding that I needed in my life.
And if you needed anything, you didn't have to worry about it. All you had to do was whisper to somebody's ear and it was done. And it was just like a great big family, and it still is. I love it.
At one point, wound up discovering a spinal disease at Emory, and wound up having 4 back surgeries. The church was my backbone. My mom lived in California. Philip's mom and the women of the church made sure that we had meals, because I was in hospital for 40 days. And it was a long period of recovery with a, body cast, and couldn't walk, couldn't do anything. And they became the hands and feet.
During church service, there's a part where we always greet
the families that are visiting or the visitors and guests. And the way we do it is we get up and walk around and hug people. And that is just a special thing. I think that adds a special touch. It's more than just having people stand up and be welcomed and where you clap and hand them a greeting card.
We open our doors to everybody, the young, the middle, the old, the single, the married, those that are alternative lifestyles, you name it.
I stand at that door right there every Sunday morning at 7:45. And everyone come in, I give them a hug and a kiss. Because you really don't know what a person has been through and what a person is going through. So if you give them a hug and a kiss, it makes their day.
Providence was very much a come as you are church.
That's what people come to join. They feel welcome. They feel like, cause sometimes people are in a state of mind where they need that compassion, where they need someone to love. And when they come here, they can find it here.
I think growing up in Providence, it has taught me a lot of things. And I think family, not just your birth family and extended family, but even larger extension of that, including your church family. And Providence is home.
I can recall so many people who had an impact, not just my family, but the
So
McCalls, the
many
Miltons, the Jacksons, the Hatchets, you know, Ruby Harris. I remember Louise Moore, Sister Ogletree, Connie Marshall's mom,
Mama
right?
Hannah, Papa Joe.
I mean, just we can go on and on about the number of individuals outside of our families that were really family.
They were family.
Right? I mean, they would reach in their pockets and give us money every week. They would give us Bible verses. They would pray with us. As we got older, they wanted to know, you know, what we were doing for school, and they were always involved.
We found deacons who we immediately were very much akin to, people who would reach out to us, who would call us just in general, just to check in on you, to celebrate birthdays, and to just make certain that all was well in your life. So certainly that old-time feeling of familial love is one of the hallmarks of Providence.
It provided us a stable place for us to have friends, support, and really just have a village to kind of help assist in the raising us.
Knowing that my youth pastor would be there for me and my friends would be there for me, I'll just tell her to keep your head up. And because I know that there are a lot of people who are there for me and who have encouraged me to do better.
I think nothing can surpass the human element of connecting with someone in spirit and in love and consistency, being present, being genuine, and just being there. So I think Providence has always been a church to profess its love for not only its members, but its community. I think kids know when people know when you genuinely have a vested interest in them. And so I think as Providence continues, you know, its growth and its success, it must stay true to the gospel, not only in words, but in its actions of love.
It's the people. The people make the church. They are friendly, they welcome you, and this may seem stupid, but they don't care what you wear. You come as you are. And I used to say, when people say you don't have on any stockings, I would say, well, I don't think they walked around in the desert 40 years wearing stockings and high heels.
Providence is also a place for everyone to play a part in doing the work of God in the world.
The theme would be always being cognizant that we're mere vessels used by Jesus Christ to reach out and touch the least, the lost, the left behind, even those that have been kicked to the curb, only to find out that the curb had already been stolen.
The most important part of my growth here was just being able to develop my relationship with God and understand that was the most important thing to help me to get to anywhere else that I wanted to be in life.
I've never been one who wanted to be a part of whatever was the biggest thing going or the flavor of the day in terms of a church that everybody was gravitating to. Providence, on the other hand, is to a certain degree a traditional church with traditional church values, those values that have sustained the African American community ever since we've been on these shores. That's what I found there, was the warmth, the family connection that is what really has nurtured my soul over the past 21 years.
We always look at the building, but it's the people that make the church. I am the church, you are the church, all of us make up the church.
And just as the congregation was poised to celebrate its 150th year, Providence, the nation, and the world faced an unimaginable challenge, a global pandemic that forced the community to suspend face-to-face gatherings. The congregation has not only survived, but thrived, using video conferencing for worship, Bible study, and the music ministry. But the pandemic has not been the only challenge.
The ways in which we have stayed resilient and strong as a ministry in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic, in the midst of violence against Black and brown bodies, in the midst of political upheaval during the presidential election that occurred in 2020, is really rooted in the DNA of who Providence Missionary Baptist Church has always been called to be. Any organization that has been founded by former slaves, that has been able to thrive through 150 years, through the end of slavery, through Jim Crow, through civil rights, through the major issues that persons of color have had to deal with over those 150 years. And rather than succumbing to the oppression and the systems of oppression that we have had to deal with, our organization has continued to stay strong and continue to thrive. That is the faith DNA of Providence Missionary Baptist Church.
What's more, even in the midst of great challenge with prayer and hard work, Providence marked yet another major milestone. The congregation paid off our mortgage in full and celebrated by ceremoniously burning the mortgage during a Sunday worship service.
The fire that burned in our ancestors to found this branch of Zion, the fire that burned in my predecessor to bring us here, it burns within us today. And by that fire, the mortgage on this church is extinguished.
Yet again, proof that God is still moving the life of each member of the Providence family. The foundation is solid for ministry, salvation, baptism, and the roadmap for the future is clear, helping young and old navigate through doors that God keeps open.
This is our story. This is our song. Praising our
Providence always has a minister with a good word, so that feeds your spirit.
Providence in the future, I think, will stay relevant because they have a pastor that is young and he is connected to the younger generation, and he has sought ways to reach this demographic through social media, through programs that he has in the church. And he also goes outside the church to make sure that he reaches out to this demographic.
I see 150 years down the line where this branch of Zion has, flourished in this or a similar community where it has a mission to fulfill of leading persons to Christ, reaching out into the community, not looking at itself, but finding and finding other souls that it can lead to a level of salvation in Christ. And I think that mission is continuous so long as there's life on earth.
I see it as a legacy for our children to emulate what has been established here. I see it as an integral part of the community, involving not only our neighbors, but our outreach. I'm very proud of the outreach that we have done. And if this legacy can continue through our children, from us to our children, I think it will be a very, very important part of our future.
You can't do things like you did 150 years ago. We continue to evolve, but God's words still stay the same.
To become a congregation that has existed for 150 years in a nation that's not in a post-racial situation, in a nation which continues to impede the psychological, educational, and political growth of a people, it is absolute miracle that a congregation of this magnitude can still open up its arms and continue to be a viable force.
I think that if you can survive 150 years and make an impression on the younger folk, you have earned your keep.
Mainly, I just hope to see the family get bigger, we bring more people in and just help the whole community, just come bigger.
I hope that Providence can reach out further and continue to touch people, even more so than where we're going now.
Not only being a church within its physical edifice, but a church that, spirit will resonate not only throughout the city, but I think throughout this state and country.
My family, again, dates back to my great-grandparents, and that legacy has continued, and now my children are members of Providence, and so I look forward to the legacy continuing.
So it's just about helping the community to be self-sustaining, not self-sustaining, but I guess so, helping people to be more self-reliant and being able to get out and do instead of having, it's okay to give somebody a fish, but it's awesome if you can teach them how to fish so they won't have to be hungry anymore. And so I think that's what the vision is of the church, is to be able to help people to become more self-reliant and to be able to do for themselves to where they won't have to be dependent on the things that we're able to give them.
When there's somebody that's in need, and people will be in need in a city like Atlanta, and when they say, where do I go for help? I just want Providence's name to be at the top of the list.
We have so many other things that are leaving impressions on us and taking us down, and I think that is the one thing that really lifts you. That whole spiritual, religious portion of your life. And I feel it's very, very, very much needed. So hopefully, I am very optimistic that the church will be around for a long time, and so will Providence.
We as missionary Baptists should fulfill that missionary aspect, as far as whether it's abroad, in other parts of the world, or if it's just here locally outside of these four walls. That is where we should be. In order for Providence to thrive for another 150 years, we have to continue to let everyone know how much we love God, and we love God just a little bit harder than everybody else.
The community is changing. It is changing fast, very, very fast. And as I told Pastor Williams, he and I were talking, and I told him, I said, 5 years from now, your congregation is not going to look like it looks now. So you need to be prepared, but you also need to begin to prepare the congregation for the changes. And I think they're going to be positive changes, though. I don't think it will be anything negative. I think it's just going to be positive.
So quite naturally, things today we're not doing like we used to do because we are in a different area and we're growing. And in order to grow, you got to make changes.
I think Reverend Williams is onto something. He's creating a culture now where he's opening up the doors, where everybody's, come on in. You're accepted, you're loved, you're forgiven. Come on in, we want you in here, right? And in the meantime, it's up to us to move past our shallow selves and to interact with people as they come in the doors. That's how we change this thing for the next 150 years.
My prayer for Providence for the next 150 years is that it continues to be that strong light, that guiding light, that foundation in the community.
My prayer would be that we would continue to reach out to serve the least, the lost, the left out of our community, and that we will have continued to bring them to Christ through our mission, our activities of reaching out and giving to them, meeting their human needs, and helping them to feel the love, the Christian love coming from us to them, such that they have then been brought to Christ through our fine works.
Even till today, we are really trying to teach our youth and the people who are involved in trying to carry us forward. I really believe that we won't physically be around, but I believe that our entity will be here for years and years to come.
I think Providence is just kind of like that heartbeat of Southwest Atlanta.
It means everything to me. It's really just brought my family together in a way that I knew was possible, but you can actually see, and I'm tearing up, and I'm sorry, because it is so life-changing. I remember sitting in the congregation before we joined, and I heard in my spirit that, this is going to change your family. And for me, I'm very, very close to my family. It's like my family is everything. My friends are everything. And seeing that come to fruition is just something that's just extremely moving for me.
You can join from outside, inside, it doesn't matter. The doors of the church are always open.
Always. I remember when Jane Fonda joined.
Right. Right.
And she was
right.
baptized here.
So yeah, we had a lot of history with people coming. Seriously, through all the doors. We have 4 doors that you can enter into the sanctuary. And they come from all 4 doors. They come from all walks of life. And they are open and you're welcome.
To think about an open door being something that takes you away from your history and takes you away from your family and basically strips you of your humanity is a painful thought. But when the church says the door is open, it's saying, come as you are. Whatever your issue might be, whatever your challenge might be, come as you are. Not only will we embrace you, but we will help you mature into who it is God intends for you to be. Help you discover your gifts. Help you find ways to use your gifts and help you get in touch with your roots, where you come from.
Providence has understood that no matter what is going on the world around us, there's a call on our lives based upon the faith that is within us. And that's not a new phenomenon with us. That's been going on for 150 years. And so we simply stood on the shoulders of our ancestors. We stood on the shoulders of brothers and sisters who came out of Friendship Baptist Church 150 years ago and said slavery might have just come to an end, but we've got to start this ecclesiastical entity called Providence, and nothing can stop us. We stood on the backs of brothers and sisters who were able to make it through a Jim Crow era and continue to have a church that thrives, and said nothing can stop us. We stood on the backs of brothers and sisters who were here in Atlanta, in the heart of the South during the Civil Rights Movement, and continue to grow and thrive as a church, saying nothing can stop us. And so when we come across a pandemic in 2020 stretching into 2021, all we did was follow our history. Nothing can stop us. And with faith in Jesus Christ, we've been able to move forward.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him.